Well, good morning. Let's stand together as we sing. When all I see is the battle, you see my victory. When all I see is a mountain, you see a mountain move. And as I walk through the shadow, your love surrounds me. And there's nothing to fear now, for I am safe with you. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet, and I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And if you are for me, who can be against me? For Jesus, there's nothing impossible for you. And when all I see are the ashes, God, you see the beauty. When all I see is a cross, God, you see an empty tomb. And so when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet, and I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. An almighty fortress, you go before us, and nothing can stand against the power of our God. 'Cause you shine in the shadows, and you win every battle, and nothing can stand against the power of our God. You're an almighty fortress, and you go before us, and nothing can stand against the power of our God. 'Cause you shine in the shadows, and you win every battle, and nothing can stand against the power of our God. An almighty fortress, God, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. 'Cause you shine in the shadow, and you win every battle, and nothing can stand against the power of our God. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet, and I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. We sing, oh God, the battle belongs to you. This morning we're going to sing about some battles, some trials we may face. One of the most famous battles, actually, the entire Bible. We're going to sing about a God who rescues, a God who still saves, a name above all other names. So if you would, as you think about maybe some things you're walking through, some trials that maybe you're facing, some things that are weighing you down today, some battles that you're facing, some giants in front of you, just sing these words with me as just thinking about those things. Yeah. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. And this is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. 'Cause this is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. Yeah, this is how. And this is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. Through every battle, through every heartbreak, through every circumstance, oh, I believe that you are my fortress, and you are my portion. Yeah, you are my hiding place, and I believe you are the way, and the truth, and the life. I believe you are the way, the truth, the life. I believe through every blessing, through every promise, through every breath I take. I believe that you are provider, and you are protector, and you are the one I love. I believe you are. You're the way, in the truth, you're the light. I believe you are the way, in the truth, you're the light. I believe you are. It's a new horizon, and I'm set on you. And you meet me here today with mercies that are new. All my fears and doubts, well, they can all come to, because they can't stay long when I am here with you. It's a new horizon, and I'm set on you. Here today with mercies that are new, and all my fears and doubts, well, they can all come to, because they can't stay long when I believe you are the way, and the truth, yeah, the life. I believe you are the way, and the truth, you're the life. I believe you are. It's a new horizon, and I'm set on you. And you meet me here today with mercies that are new. And all my fears and doubts, well, they can all come to, because they can't stay long when I believe you are the way, and the truth, you're the light. Oh, I believe you are the way, and the truth, you're the light. I believe you are. We're singing, you are holy, you're great and mighty. The moon and the stars declare who you are. And I'm so unworthy, but still you love me. Forever my heart will sing of how great you are. And it's fallen from the clouds, a strange and lovely sound. I hear it in the thunder and the rain. And it's ringing in the skies like cannons in the night, as the music of the universe plays. And we're singing, you are holy, you're great and mighty. The moon and the stars declare who you are. And I'm so unworthy, but still you love me. Forever my heart will sing of you. And all glory, honor, power is yours. Amen. All glory, honor, power is yours. Amen. All glory, honor, power is yours forever. Amen. Yeah, we're singing, you are holy, you're great and mighty. The moon and the stars, they declare who you are. And I'm so unworthy, but still you love me. Forever my heart will sing of you. We're singing, you are holy, you're great and mighty. The moon and the stars declare who you are. And I'm so unworthy, but still you love me. Forever my heart will sing of how great you are.
We're so happy that you're here with us this morning. My name's Janessa. If I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, I would love to, so stick around after church this morning. Couple things that we're going to talk about announcement-wise. First off, I just want to celebrate that last Sunday was awesome. I didn't have a chance to be there, but I hear that Kevin had a lot of water dumped on his head. It was a lot. Yes, because you guys, and why was it so much? Because you brought so many school supplies for foster families, right? Yes! So proud of you all. Well done. Thank you, Restoration Kids, for heading that up. We've got this lovely Make Waves graphic up here because they just finished out their summer, and their whole theme was making waves, right? Making an impact in their community. And so we're so grateful for them. We're so grateful for everything and all the leaders and everyone that put in so much to make this summer so awesome for them. Thank you for being a part of that. And we're also celebrating just kind of move up, right? School starts. Our 5th graders move into service and into our student group as 6th graders. It's very exciting. So we've got a lot to celebrate around here. So over the course of August, we were focused on collecting school supplies for families, right? I want you to continue to just put your mind now on September as we move into our 2nd Saturday in September. For now, just make sure that 2nd Saturday of the month is blocked off on your calendar, okay? Because our community impact team is hard at work and making sure they're ready to go to lead you and an amazing opportunity to partner with our community. So just a little bit of an idea of what's coming is we will be working with our partner, the United States Institute Against Human Trafficking. That's one of the areas that we focus on around here. We believe that it's so important that our church, that every church is partnering in the work to end human trafficking in our communities. So we care deeply about that. We're going to continue to serve in that way, and so you'll get more information about that, but just make sure that you're always ready to serve with us on the 2nd Saturday of the month. Sound good? Cool. Next Sunday, community lunch. Yay, it's the best. This is very simple. After church next week, we will move into the cafeteria. We will sit around tables. We will spend time together. And I believe Mama Bracy is making brunch. Yes, it's my favorite one that she does. I could eat breakfast food all day, every day. It's my favorite, okay? So she is making brunch for us. It's going to be great. We do that because, we love this time where we sit in rows and we hear teaching, and that is important. But what is even more important is when we sit around tables and we get to know each other and we build community. That is so critical. So we're going to do that together. We want to invite you to make sure you stick around after church, whether you've been here forever or this is your first Sunday. We want to invite you to share a meal with us and to spend that time together. So just keep that on your calendar. Next week, right after service, we will head into the cafeterias. We will have lunch together. It will be a lovely time. Okay? If on your seats here, I think we've got them every other, so feel free to steal one from someone if you don't have one, okay? We've got these lovely Connect cards. Do me a favor, fill those out. Let us know how we can be praying for you. That's really important to us. We want to know how we can be praying for you throughout the week. You can drop those off in the offering box, which is now on the connection desk. We're doing a lot of change-ups every week, have you noticed? Got some new decor. Surprise! We were surprised, you were surprised, everybody's surprised, okay? So, listen guys, everything's okay. So every week, like I said, it's going to be find Waldo, but find the connection desk, maybe find the offering box. We want to keep you on your toes, okay? So this is what you're going to do. You're going to fill out that connection desk. You're going to go on a scavenger hunt for the offering box. Hint, it's at the connection desk, okay? And Denise will be there, and she would love to talk to you after service as well. So drop that off. If you are new with us this morning, welcome. We're so grateful that you're here. We want to invite you to something special. It's called 5 for 5. It's a great time. You're going to spend 5 minutes talking to Denise. She's the best. You're going to want to talk to her. She's going to share a little bit about who we are, but more importantly, she's going to share about the amazing partners in the community that we work with every single month. So you'll hear us talking about 2nd Saturday Serve. She's going to talk about the partners that we work with, and then we're going to donate $5 in your name to one of those partners as a thank you for being here. So the reason why we do that is we know that we could give you a mug or a cheesy welcome gift that we know you don't really want, and you're going to give to Goodwill. We get it. So instead, we'd rather partner with you to give back, and that's what we're going to do this morning. So go talk to Denise. You'll spend 5 minutes. It's lovely. You can drop that Connect card there as well. All right, so we have a lot of fun things going on here as we move into the fall and this new school year for all of our kids and students. Our students will be back here at 4 o'clock today. We're pumped about that. Come join us. But before we go any further, we would love for you to stand up, say hi to the people around you. Restoration Kids, you can follow Mr. Billy down to your classroom.
I'm glad you're here this morning. And students, welcome back to school. Everybody else, welcome to the honeycomb. I'm not sure. It's like we're in a beehive, but like an electric, like it's like a discotheque of beehives. So I'm glad you're here this morning as we continue this series. We're talking about the names of God and how important the names are. And I remember a specific moment in my life where I found out how important a name can be. This came after a very traumatic moment in my life. I was in my grandparents' ranch. I grew up in the city. I really did not grow up around farms. Like, don't hear me as some person knows how to work with animals or knows anything about this. I'm a disaster when it comes to farms. In fact, this moment proves it. I was at my grandfather's farm, and they would bring in this massive crop of new steers and new calves every year. And they would bring them in, and then we would have a rodeo. Now, I'm not sure why my grandfather thought it was a cool idea to have a rodeo, considering that some of us were not good with animals, and we were not designed to do rodeos. And so he just would give us a rope, and he'd be like, whoever ropes the most of these steers wins. Now, I don't even remember what the prize was. I don't think there was one, if we're being honest. I think the prize was not dying. It's like one of those activities where the whole goal of the activity is to not die. Any of you who are scuba divers, you know what I'm talking about, or skydivers. The whole goal of the activity is not to die. That's how you were successful, is you did not die. That's what this was like for me. So he just hands me a rope. He's like, he shows me how to lasso, so how to make a lasso. He'd already tied it off for me, but it was ready to go. He's like, all you do is you run out there, and then you start, whipping around your head, and you're going to go like this. It's going to grab one of those steers. You're going to pull it towards you, and then you're going to tie it up, which sounds very simple. I don't know if you've ever done this before. It's not simple. I think, you've done this before, right? You know what I'm talking about. It's not simple. Have you done this before, Aaron? Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, exactly. Like, this is not something that's that simple, but he just tells me it's going to be really easy. So he lets me loose in this pen with all of these animals. Now, they're brand new to the farm. He has not seen them before, really. He doesn't really know much about them, but there's a bunch of them. There's a ton of them running around. And they are not yet part of his normal flock of animals. They are just there as these new ones. So he doesn't know their personalities yet. Now, there's one that has horns. It's already grown some horns. And I'm thinking, that one's my best shot. Because if I get a rope around it, right, the horns are going to keep the rope around its head. That one's my best opportunity. And so my cousins are running around with me, and they're chasing down other ones. They grew up on farms. They knew better than what I was about to do. But I decided, I tried to rope it. I threw the rope a couple times. I wasn't even close, not even nearby. If you've watched any movies where somebody just happens to lasso something, and you're like, oh, that's that easy? It's not that easy. They're lying. Hollywood is lying to you. If you hear nothing else in this sermon today, know that Hollywood is lying to you about lassoing, okay? Critical. And so I threw it, did nothing, not even close, not even near. So I see this one with the horns. I'm like, I'm just gonna, here's my plan. I'm gonna run up next to it. And when I run next to it, I'm just gonna make a big loop in the rope. And as I run next to it, I'm just gonna stick it around its neck and then pull back. And so I do it. I make a big loop in the rope. I see the steer. I start running next to it. I run next to it, and I miss. I miss completely. Like, the rope doesn't go on its head. And all I've done now is made this animal very angry at me, like very angry. And suddenly that animal stops in its tracks, like literally, like it just skids, like it Tokyo drifts around the corner, and it now is staring straight at me. And its eyes get big, and I kid you not, it does the whole hoof in the grass thing, like this thing happens, and it charges at me like real hard. And fortunately, it hits me between the horns with its forehead, knocks me to the ground, but then it reaches up between my legs with said horn and throws me in the air. And suddenly my grandfather was like, this is a bad idea. This is when it hit him. Like, I do actually love my grandkids, I think, and this was a bad decision. My grandfather's a great man, fantastic man. And he realized this is a bad call, so he runs into the pen. He stops the calf from attacking me anymore. He takes me out. He puts me on the other side of the fence. That thing watched me. That animal watched me the whole time. My grandfather says, now, here's what's going to happen, Kevin. Here's what's going to happen. And he says, you're going to get a chance at kind of a revenge here. And he was like, here's what's going to happen. Because the next thing we have to do is you're going to have to overcome your fear, because we have to brand these calves. And I had to learn how to take that calf, and he was like, you're going to have to move it through the chute. You're going to have to get it to the right spot. This is why we were lassoing them apparently in the first place, was to pull them through the chute, to put them in the right spot, and to put a brand on them. Now, I'll never forget, because my grandfather, he would brand them, and he had a brand that had his name on it. Now, it wasn't just, some people have a brand, right, where it's like a logo. This is where we get the idea of branding. In fact, my family name
is Stamper. That's my last name. And I've always thought that it was just that our name meant that we would put out really small fires. Like we just stamped things out. We weren't the bravest of the bunch. We weren't the most fearful either. And we would go stamp out fires. Turns out it actually comes from branding. The idea is that we would stamp things. We created stamps or brands or logos that would go on things. That's probably where that came from. And so my other grandfather, this was not on the stamper side, but this my other grandfather who had a farm, he would then brand these animals, and he would put his name on those animals. And I remember asking him, I was like, so why do you just use your name? Why don't you have like a cool logo or something else? And he said, because when I came to this area, he lived in the panhandle of Oklahoma. It's called no man's land. Why? Because nobody wanted it. And still don't. They still don't want it, by the way. And he moved to this area, and he said, because when I moved to this area, he came out there in the Great Migration when everybody was going west, and he was 9 years old when he came to the farm. His older brother was 11 years old. His mother, their mother, then got the black lung, and she had to leave the farm and go live in Colorado, leaving her 11-year-old and 9-year-old to start an entire farm on their own. My grandfather worked that farm. His brother got out as quick as he could. But my grandfather worked that farm at the time he was 9 years old. At the time he was 90 years old. And he said, here's what I've learned, Kevin. He said that more important than a brand is, he said, my name is the most important thing I have. My name is the most important thing I have. And it's interesting how that works, isn't it? Because his name actually meant that much, and it carried weight in the community. Just his name mattered to people. In fact, I didn't know how much so until a few years later. This is actually quite a few years later, when we were driving to plant this church. We went to go get Janessa. Janessa was living in Bellingham, Washington, like the northwest corner of the United States, more South Canada than North America, basically. She was way up there, and we drove her from that corner of the United States all the way down to Tampa, and there was so much Celine Dion that played. It was my wife and Janessa, and they had control of the stereo, and there was so much Celine Dion. And guys, I don't know, I mean, she's fine and stuff, but holy cow, how much, I didn't know she had such a vast catalog, let's just say that. And we got across the country listening to so much Celine Dion, but there was a moment where we stopped in that same spot in Texhoma, Oklahoma, in that same area of the panhandle of Oklahoma in no man's land. And Janessa's car was actually having some problems. And my uncle said, just take it to this mechanic. I promise he'll treat you well. We took the car to this mechanic, and he looked at it, and he was like, there are some things, and he fixed it early one morning. And when he fixed it, he came to me, and after he was done, he said, I said, how much do we owe you? He said, there's no charge. Don't worry about it. And he said, because he actually told me, he said, your grandfather was a legend in this town. Your grandfather was a very good man. And I said, so you knew my grandfather? He said, no, but I knew his name. He knew his name. If you have a name, that may be all you have, and it may just be all you need. And that's the story we're going to look at today. Not just a name that's a good name, but a name that is not just a name that you should have, but the only name that you probably need. We've been looking at the names of God through the Bible. There's, again, about 85 names. We're not doing all of them, but we've done quite a few. And today we're going to look at one that is actually used probably the most of any name of God, any title with an adjective behind it. And it's the name Jehovah or Yahweh, but Jehovah is what it's going to be, Sabaoth. Sabaoth. So Jehovah Sabaoth. And here's what it kind of means. Let me give you a little bit of the history of this name. This name specifically is used about 300 times in the Bible. Jehovah, as you know, or Yahweh, Jehovah would be the way that most of us would say it, and through the Bible it's used as Jehovah because the name Yahweh was too holy to say, but it would usually be either Yahweh or Jehovah Sabaoth. We see it a few times used with Elohim Sabaoth. Remember, Elohim is just a generic name for God, where Yahweh or Jehovah is the specific name for our God, the God of the Bible. And we see that God as his own person. He is now Yahweh, which means he is. Remember, Yahweh is just a Hebrew form of the verb to be. It means he is, which means he is now and he always will be. What's interesting is Sabaoth is maybe a different term than you would think. Sabaoth is the term for, it means of armies or of hosts, like of a big group of people. It's like he collects them. In fact, the verb that it comes from means like to collect, to bring people together. And so he is the Lord, this Yahweh, and he is always going to be this God of armies, over armies. Now, a lot of times in your Bible and my Bible, if you're an NIV reader especially, you'll see this translated as usually God Almighty. If you've seen Almighty behind the name God a lot, that's where that comes from. It's actually usually translated God Almighty, but this is where it comes from. This is actually the words there, is Yahweh Sabaoth. And I want to look at a story today where we see this. Again, it's used over 300 times, so we're not going to look at all those. I know some of you want to. I know, John, you were hoping to stay all day and do that, but we're going to just go through just one story. It's actually the most famous story where this name is used, and I think it's a very specific reason why this name, the God of the armies, is used. I think it's a very important reason why this name shows up in this story. Again, it's used many times, but this story is the main one. If you have a Bible or a phone or whatever you have, I'd love for you to turn with me. We're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 17. It's a famous story. You know this story. And while this story has been almost overly famous, you probably learned about it if you ever went to like children's church. You probably saw it with a flannel graph or something like that. If you're as old as I am, right? You had like a flannel graph. You probably saw it on a flannel graph, or you've probably experienced it in some way or another, and you've probably heard this story. Even if you've never been to church before, you probably know this story about Jehovah Sabaoth. Now, the story, as you know, it's fictionalized. Sometimes it almost feels like a fairy tale. It almost feels like folklore. It's too big of a story for us sometimes. But I think there's a reason why this story sticks around, because it is maybe the most radical story, not just in some fictionalized version, but it's maybe the most interesting story of faith and of fear and how those two things play out. It's maybe the most important story that we have of what that looks like when faith and fear are both in the same place and how they interact. And it's still a story. The thing that I love about this story is it's not just a story that happened 3,000 years ago. This is very much a story that still happens today. What I love about this story is not that it happened. That's not why the story is famous. The reason this story is still told today and it's still famous today is because it happens. It's still happening every single day. And so what we want to look at today is this story of David and Goliath. You know the story, but I hope that today you see it with some fresh eyes, because I believe it's not just a story that happened once, but it's a story that happens still. So 1 Samuel chapter 17, right off the bat, here we go. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Sukkah in Judah, and they pitched their camp at Ephes and Damim between Soka and Ezekah. Now you guys all know where that is, right? Like I'm speaking your language. It makes sense, right? We'll get to that in just a second. We'll cover that, okay? But they pitched their tents basically between basically 5 major cities that all belong to the Philistines. Again, we'll get there in just a second. It says this: Saul and the Israelites also assembled. So they got their group together and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill, and the Israelites occupied another, with a valley between them. Now, here's what happens in this story. If you're like me, if you've heard this story a million times, one of the flaws we have in understanding the story is that we think it's a one-time thing. We think this was like the only time that the Israelites and the Philistines met. That is not the case. In fact, we're kind of coming into the story. If this was a movie, we'd be coming in right at the climax of the story, because we're really not seeing the entire picture. There is so much more between these two nations that has existed. It's been going on for a long time. In fact, if you want to, you're welcome to flip around with me for just a second. But if you go back, Exodus 13, let's go back. Actually, last week we looked at this. If you remember last week, we talked about this specific moment of crossing the Red Sea. This is an important moment, because we actually see the Philistines mentioned right there, right when they cross the Red Sea, before they get to, remember, Marah and Elam. Right before that, we see the Philistines mentioned. It's in verse 17, Exodus 13, verse 17. When Pharaoh let the people go, he did not lead them. God did not lead them onto the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. For God said if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. See, the Philistines are already showing up. And God's even saying, you're not ready to face them. You can't handle this. You can't handle the Philistines. You're not ready for these guys. And they show up right away. And from that point on, there becomes almost a stalemate between these two nations. It really becomes a standoff. They become like arch enemies. It becomes like, I don't know, it becomes this massive arch enemy situation where you have, like, I don't know, the Joker, and you have Batman, or you have like He Who Shall Not Be Named in Harry Potter or whatever, or you've got the Queen and Meghan Markle or something, probably, or Kanye and Pete, whatever your thing is. I don't know what your life's like, but there's this divide that's happened, and it gets worse. It actually becomes worse and worse the longer it goes on. There's this stalemate between the two nations. If you flip over just a little bit, chapter 23, there's also a moment where they're mentioned. Now, this is where God tells the Israelites in chapter 23, he says, this is what I want you to have. These are the nations I want you to take in. This is verse 31. Chapter 23, verse 31. I will establish your borders from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean. Now it's going across this big area. And then he's saying, and from the desert of the Euphrates, I will give into your hands the people who live in that land. Who are the people that live in that land? The Philistines. So I'm going to give you those people. I'm going to have you go to battle with these people. This is still in the book of Exodus. And he says, I'm going to deliver them. I will drive them out in front of you. So he's giving them this promise that even the Philistines are going to go to battle at some point. Over in Joshua, we even still see that they have not taken care of this. So we go through Moses' leadership, then Joshua becomes the leader. In Joshua chapter 13, verse 1, Joshua is now grown very old. He's now no longer the leader of the Israelites. He's about to pass away. But it says this, when Joshua, chapter 13 of Joshua, says, when Joshua had grown old, the Lord said to him, you are now very old, and there are still large areas of land to be taken over. And guess which ones? Verse 2, this is the land that remains, all the regions of the Philistines and the Geshurites, from the Shihor River to Egypt, to the territories of Eknon and the county, and all the Canaanite land. He's basically saying that one of the biggest areas you have not conquered yet, you still have not faced those Philistines. You still have not been there and done that. After Joshua, we have what? We have of the judges, we have 12 judges. 3 of the 12 judges will then battle with the Philistines. They will actually go to battle with them. We'll see this happen over and over again until it escalates in the book of 1 Samuel when the Philistines finally come in and take the Ark of the Covenant from the Israelites, and they really are at war now in the biggest way possible. It has escalated. That's why this moment shows up so big. It's not just about David and Goliath in this one small segment. This has been a war that has been waged for years. And here's why I say all that, and here's why this is important for us to understand. As we look at this, and maybe, do we have that map real quick, just so you can see it, just so you can understand? First of all, there's, it's a little grainy, but this idea right here is that we see there's 5 cities coming together where that red area is, and they are now gathered, and they are now creating a war against. They have now created a stronger hold on the lives of the Israelites. See, what would have happened if the Israelites would have done this earlier? They actually would have had less to battle. But they allowed the nation of Philistine to become bigger and greater and unified, and now it was coming at them. The reason this is important for us to understand is when it comes to battles in our lives, I guarantee you the biggest battles you're facing are not ones that just popped up. They're not ones that just happened on a random Tuesday afternoon. These usually are things that have been connected in your entire life for a long time. Most of us, we are fighting giants today. We are fighting battles today, and they've been going on for a while. They are not new. Most of us have things that we've been holding on to for a very long time. When we look at what's happening here, we can see ourselves in these shoes because we have things that we may be holding on to. Some of us have habits that we've had for a long time that are hard to get rid of. They're hard to shake. Some people would call it an addiction. For many of us, we say it's not an addiction, right? We don't want to ever say we're addicted to anything except for like when we are, right? And we've been holding on to these things, these habits that take place over and over again. Carl Jung once wrote that you are what you do. I don't know if you've read Carl Jung, one of the most famous philosophers and psychologists of the 20th century. But he said, you are what you do. And he said, not what you say you'll do. Most of us, we live a life saying we will do one thing, but it turns out our entire life is spent doing the other. We do quite the opposite. We act as though we're going to change. We act as though we want to do something different. We act as though I'm not addicted to, I could stop at any time. That's what we say. And then on the other hand, we still do. Right now, I think we live in the world of digital addiction more than any other addiction, but that addiction feeds other addictions. And we live in this world where we say we are not addicted to, however, we could not do without. And we're living in a world where we say we are not addicted to, but we are. Those habits, they hold on to us for a long time. Some of us, we have hang-ups. We have these hang-ups that we've been holding on to for a long time. Like there's just a recurring habitual thing that's going on in our lives, but a recurring issue. Not maybe an addiction, but something that just shows its face over and over again. And we keep trying to go down the same path to fix it, even though we know it will never be solved by the same actions over and over again. As it's said, is that Einstein once said, which it was not Einstein who said this, but Einstein once said, that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? Again, not Einstein. Last I found was it was actually a book written in like 1983. It's a lot more recent than Einstein. Anyways, but the saying stands that idea of insanity is we just keep doing the same thing over and over again. Our lives keep having the same pattern over and over again, and we expect a different result somehow. And we keep going back to the same well, whether it's like relationships we keep going to. We're like, well, the next relationship will fix the previous one. The next relationship will be the right one. The last one was the wrong one, but the next one will be better. And what we look for to solve our problem is the same thing that created the problem in the first place. Right? We think the next job will be the thing. It's like, well, the next job, if I get the job I want, then everything else gets fixed. And so the last job was the problem, but the next job will be the solution. Here's the problem with the next job is you take you to the next job too. I'm just saying there's a common denominator here. And if it's nobody else, it might be you. Steve Carell once said about Michael Scott in The Office. He once said in an interview, he said, if you're looking around thinking my office doesn't have a Michael Scott, he said, well, that's bad news because you're him. That's kind of the way it feels sometimes, right? These are just hang-ups that we have. We just keep going back to the same thing, expecting a different result. And the last thing that I'll say sometimes I think we deal with is just hurt. I think we hold on to hurt for a really long time, maybe longer than we ever expected it to be there. And the problem is we don't even see it anymore, but it's deep within our souls. There's a great book out that I read just a couple months ago, but the author says that you cannot repair, you are bound to repeat what you won't repair. You're bound to repeat what you won't repair. And for many of us, we have hurts that we've never actually repaired. We've never let God actually repair those things. We've never allowed that to happen, and so we just hold on to it. And you know the sayings, you know the old phrases of hurt people, and all that stuff. But the truth is we hurt ourselves more than anybody else. I think we self-sabotage based on that. I think we hold on to hurt so deeply that we actually believe that we are not worthy of anything else besides being hurt. And we live in that over and over and over again. It's interesting because we don't even see it sometimes. We don't even see what's going on. And we don't even understand it. And these giants are right in front of us. And sometimes we don't even pay attention. And so what we're doing so many times is it's not a giant that just popped up yesterday. It's usually an addiction that we've had for a long time. And we keep saying we're going to do something different, but we keep doing the same thing. Or it's a hang up of some sort, thinking we're going to try something else, but instead we're just trying the same thing over and over again. Or it's a hurt that we've never actually repaired, so we're just bound to repeat it over and over again. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about, and maybe you're facing something like that actually here today. And this story is for you. This story is the dark night of the soul. This is a story where this is the apex, the climax of how we see a giant actually be slain. Something like that in your life actually being taken down. So if you are still with me, go back over to 1 Samuel chapter 17. We're going to continue on to see how this plays out. Verse 4, so a champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. I love that. And then some. He had a bronze helmet on his head. He wore a coat of armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. Just so you know, by the way, that's 6 cubits and a span is probably, most people believe it's over 9 feet, around 9 to 10 feet, somewhere in there. That's what most people believe. There are some scholars who would say it was shorter than that. Some would say he's even taller than that. Most important thing is to know he's a big dude. He's like a big dude. He'd be that guy that you were at a restaurant and you couldn't help yourself. You'd be like, that's a big dude. You know the guy? You know what I'm talking about, right? You just see big people and you're like, well, that's a big guy. And for some reason, we can't help ourselves. And then the first thing you say to them when you're talking, you're like, hi, I'm Kevin. How tall are you? You just can't help. You're like, I just got to know. I don't know why I need to know, but I need to know. That's kind of where he's at. He's a big dude. He's a big guy. And then notice what it says. It says that his armor weighed about 5,000 shekels. That's about 150 pounds, somewhere in there. So just his armor that he has on is like 2 middle schoolers are just hanging on to him at all times. I mean, that's what it's like. He is, and that's just his armor that he's wearing to fight in battle. Now, I want you to notice something else that happens here in this paragraph. Notice that it mentions the name bronze 4 times. Now, we don't read it this way because we don't fully understand what's going on here. I will not go deep into this. If you have questions about it later, it's very interesting. But actually, this battle is not just about people. It's actually a battle of technology. And what's happening here is that Goliath's not just a big dude, but this is the age. If you remember, like, there are ages of the world. There was the Iron Age, and this is the very beginning of the Bronze Age. And the bronze was the newest metal. It was like the coolest thing to work with, and it was a better metal than anything that had come before. That's why it's mentioned 4 times in this paragraph, that he had a bronze helmet. He had bronze armor. In fact, it's going to go on. It's going to say that he had bronze greaves. He had a bronze jab. There was a javelin. All these things were on him that were things that would have been bronze. The reason that that's so important is because this is new technology. Not only are they overwhelmed by the guy's size, they're overwhelmed by his tech, by the stuff he has. He is, all in all, the world's greatest army basically standing in one package, right? And so they look at this, and that's why they're terrified. Then it does say in verse 7, his spear shaft was like a weaver's rod. Its iron point weighed 600 shekels. Notice that's iron. They haven't evolved that to bronze yet. But his shield bearer then went ahead of it. I don't know what a shield bearer's job is. I don't know who this guy is. It seems like the worst job to have. Like, I mean, it's like you've seen the old memes of like having who's the lifeguard at the Olympics for swimming? Like, why is there a lifeguard next to the swimming Olympics? You know, like that kind of, that's what this guy's job is. Like, oh, I got you, bro. I'll protect you. So Goliath then stood and he shouted to the ranks of Israel. Notice what he says. He says, why don't you come out and line up for battle? Why do you do that? Like, why are you even showing up? He says, am I not a Philistine? Are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man, have him come down to me. And he's saying, basically, I want you to have one person, one victor, one person who's your champion. They're going to come fight me, right? And I don't know if we did this in America, who our champion would be. I would imagine it's The Rock. I would imagine Dwayne Johnson would be our guy. We'd send him over, and whether through brute force or just through a lot of charm, he'd win for us. You know? So either one. And he says, I want you to have one person. And I have wondered about this, by the way. They used to do this so they wouldn't shed so much blood. That's actually why they did this, is they actually wanted to take more people prisoner than they did want to kill everybody, because they wanted more people as servants in their kingdom. That made their kingdom bigger. So they didn't want to kill people necessarily. And I've always wondered why we don't do this today. Like, if we just had a really good rock, paper, scissors battle or something, we're like, we'll send our best guy, you send your best guy, we're going paper. You know, I don't know. It just seems like a good idea. So anyways, that's what's happening here. He says, you choose one person, come down to me, and if I'm able to fight and they kill me, we'll become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you'll become our subjects and serve us, the Philistine said. This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other. Because that one person's victory, whether it's Goliath or whether it's somebody else, that one person's victory is going to mean victory for everybody, right? That one person's victory is victory for everyone. And what's happening here is he's calling them out. It even says right after that, verse 11, on hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Now, it says down in verse 16, it says that for 40 days, this same Philistine, Goliath, would come out and just yell. He would just yell at people. He would just come down and just start yelling the same insults over and over again. What's interesting to me about this story is that the more you pay attention to it, the more you realize that they're not afraid of a person. They're afraid of a perception. Like, I don't think they're afraid of Goliath. I think over those 40 days, they're just letting this build up in their own heads. It's getting worse and worse every day. If you know what this is like, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But we've seen, even just in America, how anxiety is spiking more than anything else. I believe that that's the thing our country needs Jesus for more than almost anything else, if I'm being honest. I think we need him for salvation and all those things. But these days, we don't need him because we're impoverished or because we need food on the table or we need healing in the same way because we have great medicine or whatever. What we need Jesus for is because we're more anxious than we've ever been. And he promises to bring peace. And the reality about it is that what's happening here is this anxiety is just ramping up within them. I don't know if you've read the stats on this. In 2019, anxiety had diagnosable anxiety, let me say it that way. Diagnosable anxiety had gone from about 6% to about 8% in 2019. 8% of people were diagnosably having signs and physical struggle with anxiety. In 2020, that number went from 8% to 34%. Obviously, there's a global pandemic, things start happening, but notice how we just become so anxious about everything. And why? Was it because there was a real threat? Absolutely. But was it much more because there was a perceived threat? Absolutely. I would say the perceived threat was always greater than the real threat. There is a real threat. I'm not saying it was not a real threat. But the perceived threat becomes greater in our minds at all times. And the more we let something sit, the longer it becomes a bigger issue in our minds. It becomes a bigger part of who we are. We start to worry about it more and more and more. This is all worry is. Worry is just the inability to do something about something. So you worry about it more, right? How many of you worry about things that could never, ever happen? Like they will never, it's literally impossible that it will happen, but somehow you think of it. My wife, I love her, but she is like amazing. There are things she's thought of. Then I'm like, do you understand the probability of that thing happening? I'll never forget. There was one time, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but she's not here today. She's out of town taking care of her mom who just had surgery. So I'll tell you. But there was one time we were leaving for a flight. We were in an airport hotel. And we were leaving for a flight. It was very early in the morning. We had a 5 a.m. flight. So we have to get up at like 3 o'clock, right, and get out of the hotel. And it's dark outside, and it's a little bit scary because we're in a big city. We don't really know. We're on our own. And so Jane was just a baby at the time. So I pick up Jane, and I'm like, hey, we have to get to the shuttle to get to the airport, like now. And my wife's like, okay, you just go down with Jane. Hold the shuttle for me. I'm like, I got it. So I take Jane. I take the bags. I go get on the elevator, go down to the lobby, hold the shuttle for her. And as I'm sitting there waiting for her, she finally comes down. She gets in the shuttle. We get to the airport. She's like, Kevin, I was so scared in that hotel room. And I was like, oh, yeah? And she was like, yeah, I started worrying. What if somebody comes in and kills me? What if somebody comes in and kills me? And I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, I don't think I was going to do that. Like, it's just a La Quinta or whatever. Like, I don't think we're fine. And she was like, yeah, but I thought, if I get killed, they're going to think you did it because you're my husband. We watch Dateline. And she's like, they're going to think you did it. And she's like, so I made a plan. I was like, what was your plan? And she goes, well, with my blood, as I'm dying, I would write in the carpet, not Kevin. I was like, Marie, that's the worst thing you could write. Because what would a killer write? Not me. Like, they're going to immediately be like, it was definitely Kevin. Because it says right here, not Kevin. I was like, why is that a good plan? But first of all, how did we get there? You're worried about things that are not happening, will not happen. This is what happens to us. And what happens is these things that we've been holding on to, the habits, the hurts, the hangups, they get worse the longer we just think about them. Think about this for a second. The hurt that you've never dealt with, I guarantee you it's getting worse the longer you let it sit, the longer you let it grow in your own head. The forgiveness that you've not given to somebody else, I guarantee you it's going to get worse and worse in your head until the moment you go do it. It builds and builds in our heads until the moment you just go sit down with somebody and say, hey, there was a misunderstanding here. What happened? What's going on? It will grow and grow and grow. That's what worry does to us. And I guarantee you there's a big opponent there, but the opponent's not as big as they've made him to be. He has grown in their minds. He's now taking up residence in their spirits because he's just standing there yelling at them day after day after day. Most of us are not actually afraid of a person. We're mostly afraid of a personality. We're afraid of a perception of something. We're afraid of something else that surrounds it. And this Goliath, he knows that. He's going to call them out day after day. Now, what's going to happen here? I want you to see what happens. Verse 12. This camera pans really quick. It's like a whiplash. It's like a smash cut straight to David. I want you to see how the story plays out because it's almost like an epic novel. I love it. they get to this escalation point of Goliath in one scene, but then they're like, and over here, in another scene, we have this guy, David. Verse 12, now David was the son of Ephrath, named Jesse, of an Ephrathite named Jesse, and he was from Bethlehem in Judah. Remember that he's in Bethlehem. That's where he's from, in Judah. We'll get to that in a little bit. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time, he was very old, and Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to war. The first was Eliab, the second was Abinadab, and then it goes through all these people, Shema, and David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his sheep at Bethlehem. Now, I guarantee you, what's happening here is this is actually a callback to reminding us of who David is. Because remember, when David is chosen, it's a chapter before this, but there's a little bit of just reminding us of David's character before we get into seeing him as the hero. There's a little bit of callback to him becoming like an origin story. If you are in your Bible real quick, probably just flip back like a page. It's not going to go far back. But if you go back to just the chapter before, 16, remember there's this moment, go to verse 7, and it says this, that there's this guy, Samuel, who comes to anoint a new king, and he stands and he's trying to find David to anoint him king. I want you to see the verse that is so critical to this. And he's going to anoint him. It says, but the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider height or appearance, for I've rejected him. Like I've rejected the other brothers of David. They are not the ones I want. And here's why. Then he says, the Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. The Lord looks at the heart. Now, this is like David's life sentence. Like if he had a motto that he lived by, this would be it. If he had one tattoo that he could choose to put on his arm, and it would be in Hebrew because he's super hip and because he speaks Hebrew, it would be this passage. He would probably say, the Lord looks at the heart. That's what the Lord looks at. He does not look at the things that people look at. He looks at the heart. That would be like what he would have. Like if he had like a sign in his kitchen, you know, that he had hand painted with lettering, it would say like, live, laugh, love, look at the heart. Like that's what it would say that on there. And then he would sell it at Old Time Pottery for money. Like he would be that guy. Like that's what he's known for. This passage sums him up so well. And what's interesting is go down just a little bit, but it says right after that he is now anointed the king of Israel because he is seen from his heart. That's what he's for. He asked Jesse, are these all the sons you have? This is what Samuel's saying. There is still the youngest, Jesse answered. Yeah, he's tending the sheep. Remember, he's a shepherd. Samuel said, send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives. So he sent for him, and he had him brought in. He was glowing with health, had a fine appearance. He's like a McConaughey type, and had handsome features. Then the Lord said to him, rise and anoint him. This is the one. So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. Samuel went to Ramah. So this happens. This is an important moment because we see that David's whole life is about not looking at the outward appearance, but looking at the heart. And what's happening in this story is the exact opposite, right? Everybody's looking at Goliath. They're looking at outward appearance. They're looking at the tech they don't have, the big guy that's yelling at them. They're hearing this sound for 40 days, day after day, of somebody just calling them out and belittling them and terrorizing them and actually minimizing them. That's what this person is doing to them. Yet they continue to hear over and over again. But a guy shows up who's not worried about the outward appearance. A guy shows up who God says he looks at his heart. So let's skip over just for a second because David's going to show up. And I don't have a lot of time here, but he's going to show up and he's going to ask a bunch of questions. Why aren't we fighting this guy? David then shows up, hey, if God's looking at the heart, he's not looking at the outward stuff. Why aren't we fighting this guy? Why aren't we doing something about it? And they all have excuses. Well, he's really big. He's got a lot of armor. He's got a armor bearer. He's got all these things going for him. They give him excuses about it, and David's still not really satisfied with it. They do say, if you defeat him, David, here's what you get. You get to marry the king's daughter, and one of the other things you get is you get to never pay taxes again for the rest of your life, which some of us are like, how big was this giant? Like, I'm interested. You know, I might sign up if it's just no taxes. Like, that sounds pretty great. So this is like what he's promised. And he says, well, then I will go and fight for us. So skip over to verse 32. David says to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Let no one lose heart. Let that be, if you are in the middle of a struggle, of a battle of these things, let that be a verse that stands out to you. Let you not lose heart in this battle. So Saul replied, you are not able to go against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man. He's been a warrior since his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it and struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. And when it turned on me, I seized it by its hair and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine. By the way, these are the most exciting shepherding stories I've ever heard. I know some people that own sheep. Again, my grandfather had a large farm. At one point, my uncle took on part of the farm, and he started raising sheep. And this is a true story. And one time, he decided he was done with his sheep, so he was selling off all of his sheep. So he got all the sheep together, and there was a big truck that pulled up, and he put all the sheep on the truck, and it drove away. And then all of a sudden, he heard sheep. He's like, oh, no. He looks around, and there's 2 little lambs that had not made it onto that truck. And he was like, I better go catch the truck. But he only had his motorcycle with him. So he took bungee cords, and he strapped the 2 little sheep, two little lambs, onto the back of the motorcycle. He went flying down the highway to go catch the truck. And he's going very fast, which got him pulled over. And I kid you not, guys, he got a ticket for speeding, but he also got a ticket for 2 unhelmeted passengers. Shepherding's a wild job, guys. Wild job. So David has like the coolest shepherding story. I've had these things happen. Trust me, I can take care of this. God, and notice what he says. He says, not because I'm going to do it, because the God who rescued me then will rescue me now. He's very clear about who's in charge of this. He's not saying, listen, I got way better with a slingshot during that time. I'm a dead eye now. He's not saying I've gotten so much better at this. He says, because the God who rescued me then, he's going to rescue me now. And Saul says to David, go, and may the Lord be with you. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic, put on armor and the coat and all this stuff. And notice he gave him a bronze helmet. And David fastened his sword over the tunic, tried walking around, but because he was not used to them. I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I'm not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, and he chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in his pouch, in his shepherd's bag. And with his sling in hand, he approached the Philistine. Now, some people there's a lot of speculation on these 5 stones, why he chose 5. Some people believe it's a lack of faith. Like, did he think, I'm going to miss the first time, I need 4 more shots? What was the reasoning there? Some people believe it was lack of faith. Some people actually believe it was an abundance of faith. Because if you read just past this, if you go into 2 Samuel, what you find out is that Goliath had 4 brothers. And some people believe that David was going to take them all down, that he had a plan. So he goes and takes 5 smooth stones, puts them in his bag with a sling in hand, and he goes and he approaches this Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. He looked David over, saw that he was little more than a boy. He was glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. I do think it's funny that you're like in battle, and you're like, well, he's a good-looking dude, though. I mean, you got to give him that, right? I'm going to kill him, but, he looks all right, huh? And he despised him. He said to David, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? What he's talking about here is not just that you're small or you're less than. He's actually talking about the technology, saying that you have nothing against me. And this is what's going to happen, I promise you. As soon as we start to think that there is a giant in front of us and it's our time, it's us going towards it, us attacking it and saying it's not going to take rule and reign in our lives anymore. It's not going to terrorize. It's not going to minimize us anymore. As soon as we start going towards that giant, the first thing we're going to hear is, yeah, you're not strong enough, though. And you're not good enough. You don't have enough. You're not worthy enough to do this. The first thing you're going to hear is that you're not enough to make this happen. And guess what? That might actually be true. Because what David says next, it says, come here. He said, I'll give you your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. But David said to the Philistine, verse 45, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin. You come at me with the things, the outward appearance that everybody else is looking at. But I come against you in the name of Jehovah Sabaoth, the Lord Almighty. Notice what he says. He's saying the God, the Lord of the armies. He's reminding not just Goliath, who is the Lord of the armies. He's reminding the army who is the Lord of the armies. Have you forgotten that there is a Lord of this army, Jehovah Sabaoth? He is God Almighty, the Lord of the armies. He is fighting for me. It says that he is the God of Israel, whom you have defied. This day, the Lord will deliver you into my hands. I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day, I will give your carcasses of the Philistines' armies to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or by spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. This is a huge statement. He's reminding us that there is a Lord of these armies, and that Lord is still with him today. And that Lord is over the army. He is in the army. He is working through the army, but he is over all of these things. For so many of us, what's happened here, what I love is that David puts his focus in the right place. He's really not actually about swords and spears. As much as we think this is a violent story, I want you to see it a little bit differently, because he's actually the opposite of this. He's saying, I'm not here for the swords and the spears. I'm not here for the battle that you want to fight. That's not what I'm interested in. That's not what this is about. This is a battle that is bigger than you and I am worshiping the God who is above those things, the God of the armies. That is the God that I worship. And here's what you're worshiping. You're worshiping all the things you can see. You're worshiping the swords and the spears and the javelin and all the different metals that you can worship, the bronze and the iron. You're worshiping those things. I am not. This is what happens when we start to worry, is we move our worship into worry, and the two cannot coexist, because what happens is worry is actually worship misplaced. Worry is actually worship misplaced, because there's a belief that the worst is going to happen and that it can happen. You're actually worshiping that the enemy will win. Worship, if you don't know what worship, where that word comes from, it's two parts. The first comes from the word worth, and the second part is ship, meaning to show. You're showing the worth of something. You're showing how valuable it is, how much it means to you, how important it is. And when you worship, sometimes you're worshiping through worry, and when you're worrying, you're actually worshiping the enemy that will win, because you're showing how important it is, how big it is in your head, how much space it's taken up in your life. You're actually worshiping the wrong spot. Now, praise is properly placed worship. When you praise, you're properly placing your worship in the right place. And what David does here is he's not worshiping the size of Goliath. He's putting praise into the God, the Almighty, the Jehovah Sabaoth. That's where he's putting his praise. And for many of us, we don't understand it that way. There's a great book I ran into just recently again, and I read it years ago. It's called David and Goliath. It's a catchy title. You should look it up. And it's by Malcolm Gladwell. I love Gladwell. I love anything he writes. But what's interesting to me is he was writing about this story and how this story plays out through all different sectors of psychology. If you know Gladwell, he's not a Christian man. He actually would be closer to Jewish, but he's really kind of no specific religion. And when he wrote about this in many different facets. But I love the way he wrote about this story, because he was saying there's a lot of stuff behind this story. Like, probably Goliath had some health issues, more than likely. He probably wasn't a very strong man. Actually, he was just very tall. And he writes about how a slingshot actually at this time could be slung fast enough that it would go, literally, a rock could go as fast as a .45 caliber bullet. Like, I mean, he was writing about all the facts behind it. But he said that what bothers me the most is he said that Christians still read this as though David was an underdog. We love this because it's an underdog story. And I love that he talks about that, because he said, here's my problem with that, is he says, if you actually believe, if you have the faith that you say you have, then David was never an underdog. David was never an underdog. And he was like, it bothers me that so many people of faith apparently have so little faith that they put their faith in the enemy more than they put their faith in their own God. And we read this story, we still see it as this big underdog undertaking, this whole thing where it's like the smaller guy wins. At the end of the day, we should be reading it from the start going, well, this is the guy who God's chosen. We know who's going to win. There's no question about this. It's funny that a guy with little faith is the one calling out the people of faith to have more faith. And as I was listening to him, I was thinking, that's so true. I've always read this in Underdog Story. He's saying that's not the way this should be read. In fact, he even talks about in his book different times where he saw people of faith not having enough faith. One specifically that I remember like very vividly was a group of people that had gotten together in France, and it was during World War II. And this group of people, they were Christians, and they had only, a small group got together and they took in Jewish refugees in a small area of France, in Les Chabons. They had taken together like this small group of Jewish refugees, and they hid them in their homes from the Nazis. And he said it was interesting interviewing them because the Christians, this small group of Christians said, we had no fear because we knew that our God would save us. And he said, what bothers me is that was only about 1% of the Jewish refugees that needed a home. So where were the rest of the Christians that are supposed to believe in their God who's going to save them, that's going to protect them, the God of the armies? See, we're so afraid of so many things. We let the fear build up in so many ways instead of confronting it. And then we do confront it. We try to confront it on our own instead of letting the God of the armies be the one who confronts it with us. See, what's interesting for David is David just shows up at the right place at the right time. It says that as the Philistine moves closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. And reaching into his bag, he took out a stone, he slung it, and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank right into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, without a sword in his hand. And he struck down the Philistine and killed him. Now, it says that David did this. I would really, really love to argue that point, that David did not do this. David was just at the right place at the right time. David was just the instrument of the moment, but he was not the one who did this. He was even clear in his own statement that this was the God of the armies who was going to do this for him, the God Almighty who was going to do this for him. And sometimes we just show up at the right place at the right time, and sometimes we're being used in a very small way, but we have to allow God to fight those battles for us and with us. I was watching my son play basketball yesterday, and his team over here at the Y, they're first place. They're killing it. They're doing really good. And I will just say in a very kind way, that's not because of my son. He's on the team. But there's other kids on the team who are like really good. He just happened to be at the right place at the right time. He's just on the right team. Does that make sense? When we look at this, it's not because we've done something. I think about like when Steve Kerr said this. Do you remember this? After there was one game where Michael Jordan scored 50 points in a game and Steve Kerr was on his team. And he went to the press conference afterwards and they asked him about Michael Jordan scoring 50 points in the game. And he said, yeah, tonight Michael and I both scored 52 points together. Steve only scored 2. Michael scored 50. Right? Like there's a way to look at this where I don't think David did this. I think he showed up at the right place at the right time. I want to turn the camera really quickly because what's interesting about this, as we look at Goliath and we look at David, I want you to look at us today. Because I got bad news. You and I, we're not David. In this story, we want to find ourselves in the story, but we're not David. That's not us. We want to be David. That sounds really cool, but we're not David. We don't get to be David in this story. He wins, but we don't necessarily get to do that because here's what I would guess. This is where I'm going to guess we are if we were to put ourselves in this story. I would guess we're probably the rest of the Israelites. We're like sitting on the sidelines, who are kind of just waiting for defeat and just letting the enemy build up in our heads over and over and over again. We're playing a mental game mostly against ourselves. And we're just sitting on the sidelines. And that's where most of us would find ourselves. But one of the interesting things that scholars talk about in this story, if we can go back to that map really quickly, one of the interesting things you can find in these stories is that if you notice in the map, those Philistines had come together and built a place. And actually Bethlehem, if you can see it, I know it's a little hard to see, but over by a little bit between there and the Dead Sea, you see Bethlehem. And what it's believed is that Bethlehem, where David was from, was the next town to be attacked. So if the Philistines would have won this battle, they would have kept going and they would have taken over Bethlehem, David's hometown. But David then stands in the gap, not just for the Israelites at this moment, but for his own town. And what I love N.T. Wright's writing on this. He wrote a book called Jesus and the Victory of God. It was in like 1993. It's a great book. But he talks about how David's victory, remember this, David's victory is not just David's victory. David's victory is a victory for everyone. It's a victory for all the Israelites. And he said, in this story, David is a stand-in for what we're going to see of Jesus. That Jesus is the one who will go, and he's going to have to go fight our battle for us. And his victory is our victory. His victory is for all of us. Even those of us still sitting on the sidelines, even those of us that are just waiting for defeat. No. You don't get to live in that anymore because his victory is our victory. And so many of us, we're still living as though we've lost. We still live as though we're on the sidelines, we're about to lose. I'll never forget when I was in, there was one time I went and I had recorded a basketball game. It was a Kentucky Wildcats basketball game. And I had recorded this basketball game. I was going to go watch it later. And I happened to do the thing, you know what I'm talking about? When you're like, I'm going to record the game, and then you're like, oh, but nobody told me the score. Nobody told me the score. Nobody told me the score. And somebody slipped up, and they told me the score. Now, the Kentucky Wildcats had won the game. But I was like devastated in a way. I was like, great, we won, but I'm sad, I know. But I went home, and I was like, I'm going to watch it anyways. I start playing it on the TiVo DVR thing. I'm old, whatever that thing's called. DVRs come, and it's playing back. And there's a point where the Kentucky Wildcats start losing their game. And I remember getting so mad. And at one point I'm standing up and I'm like, guys, you got to play better than this. Guys, guys, what are we doing out there? What is that turnover? Was that a good shot? Should we have taken that shot? I'm yelling at the TV. My wife comes in and finally she's like, hey, Kevin, you already know they won the game. What are we doing right now? And so many of us, we're acting as though we've lost. We're still living as though we've lost when we should know we've won the game. We serve the God of all, the God who is almighty, the God of the armies, the God of hosts. That is the God who fights our battles. You have not lost. You're just sitting on the sidelines instead of getting in the battle with him. And today, you might have a battle, a big giant in front of you. You might have a huge giant in front of you. But what I encourage you to do is to realize that you've already defeated that. That's what Jesus came to do, and his victory is your victory. It is my victory. And that's why his name is the name that we cling to. His name is the name that we put in front of us. His name is the one that will drive out fear. It will drive away the hang-ups. It will drive away the hurts. It will drive away all of our habits that we need, because in his power, not in our power, but in his power, he has overcome and will continue to overcome those things. You don't need to fight. You need to not lose heart. So today we're going to close just for a second by singing just for a second about this. What I encourage you to do, if you would like to pray about something, maybe you have one of these things going on in your life right now. Maybe you have a giant in front of you. Maybe it's a work thing, maybe it's a home thing, maybe it's a forgiveness thing, maybe it's a relationship thing, maybe it's a marriage thing, maybe it's a parenting thing, whatever it is. I would encourage you to pray about that and put that in the hands of a God who's already won it, who's already defeated it. Put those things in his hands. If you'd like to pray, John's going to be right back here in this prayer room, and it's been revamped. It's great. And you can go in there and hang out in there, and he would love to pray with you. If you'd rather pray on your own, that's totally fine. But we'd love for you to pray about that and just be able to process that in this space. If you would, let's stand together as we close. Jesus, we thank you for your victory. We thank you for your victory that is now our victory. We thank you for the battles that you've already won for us and the ones that we don't even know about that you've been fighting for us for a long time. And today, Jesus, for those of us that are still living in defeat, I pray that you would call us out. I pray for those of us that are still sitting on the sidelines just watching and waiting in fear, that you would call us out from the sidelines to join the battle. But ultimately, God, we know that you are the one who will win it. And we know that you already have won it. And so today, God, I pray you would release us from whatever hang-ups we have, whatever hurts we have, whatever things we're fighting right now, whatever giants are standing right in front of us today. I pray that we would know that you are the victory, that your name is greater, that in your name we overcome, not because of what we've done, but because of your name. That you are the God of all, the God who is almighty, the God of the armies. Pray that we would realize that today, and we would sing in victory of your name.
Peace, bring it all to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break at your name, and still call the sea to still, the rage in me to still every wave at your name. And Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. And Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, and breathe and call these bones to live, call these lungs to sing once again. I will praise. And Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. And Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Sing that again. And Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. And Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. And your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. And your name cannot be overcome. And your name is alive and forever lifted high. And your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. And your name cannot be overcome. And your name is alive and forever lifted high. And your name cannot be overcome. And what a powerful name it is. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. And what a powerful name it is, and nothing can stand against. What a powerful name it is, the name of Jesus. Yeah, what a powerful name it is. What a powerful name it is, the name of Jesus Christ, my King. And what a powerful name it is, and nothing can stand against. What a powerful name it is, the name of Jesus. What a powerful name it is, the name of Jesus. What a powerful name it is, the name of Jesus.